Monolith. Chapter 10. Escape. The mechanic could see the darkness closing around the corners of his vision as he ran. It was not a hostile, angry, sentient darkness now, though, but one coming from within his own body as it began to shut down. He was panting and sobbing as he ran. His lungs felt as though every breath he took in took shards of glass in with them. His foot slammed into something on the ground. Pain raced all the way up his leg as his body begged him to stop. He toppled forwards, the light on his helmet clattering off into the darkness. He scrambled to push himself up. Something grabbed hold of him from the back, forcefully hauling him up, and the mechanic screamed in fear. "Come on, it's me! Keep moving! Keep moving!" The voice of the other guard soothed. There was no time to argue, and so the mechanic did. He scurried after the two lights of the remaining survivors, panting after them like a lost man in the desert after water. He banged his head and joints on more metal objects than he could count. He squeezed himself under pipes like a snake, rolled over motors, pressed himself into the gaps he would have previously thought impossible to fit through. The lights of his comrades were always too far for comfort, no matter how hard he tried to catch up with them. At length there came a soft red glow. Safety was imminent. The mechanic raced faster, ahead of the two white lights, and slammed into the circular door of the escape pod, toppling over to the ground and panting. The other guard came next, then Goldthwait. Goldthwait grabbed hold on the metal handle to the door hatch, and with a scream pulled it downwards. The door groaned as the purely mechanical hatch opened. Goldthwait ducked inside, then the other guard, and lastly the mechanic. As they tumbled into the hatch together, the door slammed behind with a deafening clang. As their bodies began to finally rest, the trio began laughing. It was almost maniacal, the laughter of men whose own survival was the funniest joke in the world. They'd won. They'd braved the dark and won against whatever terrible creatures had leaked in through interdimensional cracks. It was an incredible feeling. Wave after wave of relief washed over them. Goldthwait sat in the driver's seat, fastening his harness and punching in the appropriate codes to fire up the engines on the small pod. The mechanic and the guard both sat in their respective seats, as well, buckling themselves in. They were going home. Going to put boots back on Mother Earth. The mechanic thought he would kiss her beautiful visage as soon as he could. The low hum of the engines cranked up, and there was the sound of metal on metal as the pod detached and they were jettisoned into space. The mechanic gripped the small handles on his harness and closed his eyes. Sleep was already beginning to overtake him as he eased his head back into the headrest. A dull yellow glow illuminated the inside of the escape pod, almost like sunlight. It had been such a short encounter, yet far too long to go without the sun's glorious rays. "What the fuck?" The guard's voice came, a statement rather than a question. "What the fuck?" He was appalled. Disgusted, fearful, angry, and terrified all at once. The mechanic's eyes snapped open, and terror returned to his veins. He looked out the small cockpit window, his mouth tasting of metal as he knew that in spite of all his struggles, it was to no avail. They all saw it. The monolith, which had only presented one aspect of itself there in the ballroom. Its roots protruded far past the cruise ship, descending down onto the earth itself. The giant sphere which had been their home was covered in something utterly beyond darkness. As the mechanic looked on, it became increasingly apparent that the thing was eating the sunlight. The very concept of light which gave life to an entire planet's worth of life forms was nothing more than food to the monolith and its prophet. Corpses floated amidst the wreckage from the ship. Corpses of humans, corpses of gods, corpses of demons, and some living. Something large, made of a color the human eye couldn't comprehend, was wriggling and writhing in its first moments of life within our realm of existence. The mechanic stared, awestruck, as this new world unfurled. Droplets of blood floated aimlessly amidst heaps of scrap, bodies drifting with no soul left inside of them. They were specks of dust to the monolith, whatever it was. It would not stop with Earth. It would not stop with just one galaxy. It would not stop with any of the stars nor the planets. Its hunger was infinite. The very concept of infinite is one that the human mind stretches to comprehend, and it was merely how the monolith had always existed. Perhaps, in its voracious appetite, it would somehow gloss over the mechanic and crew aboard the small escape shuttle, allowing them to die of old age. But then what would happen? It would be better to assimilate into the body of God with the rest of humanity than to suffer a fate alone as the last decaying member of a species. A stream of laughter interrupted the mechanic's thoughts as Goldthwait burst out into hysterics. "I'm dreaming. It's all a dream, one from which I shall soon awaken. I don't know why God chose to put me in such a cruel nightmare, but here I am." He turned to the mechanic. "You've been good this whole time, but it's time to wake up now. It was all a dream. You know that's not true." The mechanic almost choked on his own words as he spoke them, paining himself for even stating the obvious out loud. "Shut up!" Goldthwait screamed, lunging at the mechanic. The bigger man's hands wrapped around the wiry mechanic's throats and began to squeeze. "Shut the fuck up! It's a dream! It's all a dream! We're fucking dreaming! We're fucking dreaming!" Goldthwait was shaking the mechanic's head, slamming it back into the headrest. The other guard leapt up, grabbing Goldthwait from behind and dragging him back. "Damn it, Goldthwait! Keep your head on straight!" He threw his senior officer into the wall. "What's the next move?" "You don't seem to be understanding the situation," Goldthwait shrieked, straining his vocal cords. Look out there! You tell me what the next move is." "It's bad, but there is no but. It's not bad. It's irreparably fucked." Goldthwait sank back into his seat. "It's all fucked." Goldthwait drew his sidearm and racked it once to ensure there was a bullet. Neither the mechanic nor the guard made any effort to stop him. They were tired, too tired to fight it. And besides, Goldthwait had a point, right? Maybe they should just let him. The mechanic blinked, missing the moment of impact as Goldthwait pulled the trigger. The roar of the pistol was muted only by the man's head, his inner workings splattering the window as his body slumped over. The guard and the mechanic stared at him, watching his body twitch for a few minutes, which gradually turned into hours, until the corpse ceased all movement. The mechanic stared for a few minutes more, until abject exhaustion finally caught up with him. Darkness encroached and he slumped forwards, gripped by sleep. He dreamt of the God who hungers, a universe devoid of all stars and light, left to its own devices. He knew he would be permitted to witness it all as the monolith ate, his need for sustenance taken from him. It would eat and eat and eat until it was full, and when it had its fill, it would slumber once more. It would go on like this until it inevitably was consumed by one more powerful than itself even. But within the depths of the inner workings of the monolith, for it was not made of molecules and atoms like we are, there would be a new life. The mechanic would get to see this life, if only he persisted. He would be like a god to this universe inside of a god, which was very potentially inside of another god already. There was comfort in this. He dreamed of foreign worlds, worlds which had been devoured by much more powerful worlds than Earth, and much less powerful worlds which had also been devoured. He dreamed of universes without geometry and devoid of known colors. He dreamed of light that is heard and sounds that are seen. He dreamed of wicked, evil fools being dethroned in an instant, and good, holy, helpful men being obliterated. He dreamed of squandered potential, of empires left in ruin. He dreamed it all as the wizard whispered softly into his ear. The wizard would behold all these things with the mechanic. Should the mechanic choose, they should be together for eternity. The other guard could not sleep, as the corpse talked to him in esoteric gestures. It muttered strange and soundless syllables in a tongue never heard before by human ears, and the more the guard listened, the more he understood. He understood the universe beyond ours. He understood the dream of which he was a part, and he understood that assimilation was the only escape to the nightmare he had found himself part of. His wife back home, his 2 kids, his dog, his little house in the middle of Washington State. It was all so distant. None of it was real. It had all been a dream, something of insignificance. Destiny had led him to where he was, to the moment he was a part of. The mechanic awakened with a jolt as the gunshot rang out. Blood smeared the inside of the escape pod, interbreeding with bits of skull and brain which oozed their way down the walls. Goldthwait was slumped in the cockpit, his face entirely disfigured but void of movement. The other guard slumped forwards in his seat, smoke still curling from the barrel of his gun as his one remaining eye stared ahead forever into the eternal mysteries of the universe. His skull was a thought of the past, being almost completely destroyed. The mechanic stared back. He did not know why he could not bring himself to follow suit with the rest of them. Some twisted will to see what the cruel beings masquerading as gods had left in store for him. There was a spark of wonder as he pondered the new universe that he would be allowed to be a part of. There was no hope, though. The very word was cleansed from his vocabulary. All that would be left was a void, and worlds within that void. The 2 corpses he now shared the ever-drifting escape pod with had known their place in the rankings of the universe, and somehow, somewhere in the recesses of the mechanic's mind, he knew his. His mouth no longer filled with the taste of copper, but tasted like nothing. He glared out the front window into space. There was nothing. For as far as his eyes could stretch their vision, there was darkness broken up only by tiny particles of light, uneaten stars. He kept staring in onto oblivion, the cruel hell which was presented to him as heaven. He watched slowly as the stars, too, were devoured. The red lights emitting a soft glow on the inside of the pod came days later, as the very idea of color and light itself were consumed. He would have starved to death or died of thirst, but the very idea of mortality as it had existed within our plane of reality was eaten as well. He could not scream, for there was no sound. All he had was his own thoughts, and even that was growing hazy. His thoughts turned to something dark as the months stretched on, and he cried to every god he'd ever heard the name of. None of them ever answered back. All of them had been devoured. And slowly he began to pray to the monolith. He begged for death, for assimilation, to join the endless void he was contained in and separated from entirely, asked why he alone had been spared. Years of prayer, and there was no answer. After some time, within the recesses of his mind, there came an idea. And he used his tongue, and he spoke for the first time in eons. And there was light once more. It took him so long to remember how, but soon there was water and fish and land and sea and all the creatures he could recollect, and some he made up on his own. But something important was missing. He could remember but one thing ever eluding his memory, straying just on the corners of his mind. How he had looked. After a couple 100 years of pondering and replaying memories so they were no longer memories, but memories of memories of memories of memories, he decided his original form was unimportant. His mind began to work once more, and he formed something from the dust of this new place he had created. And Adam breathed his first breath. Hey y'all, how's it going? This has been Monolith, written by Warren Walker, read by me, Warren Walker. Music by Karl Casey. I want to thank you all so much here at the end of all this for tuning in and listening to this story. It was written about 2, maybe going on 3 years ago, and I just got around to recording it now. Obviously edited a few times in between now and then, but just rereading it, I realized kind of how rough things were. But I decided, even with a rough draft, I'm going to go ahead and push it anyways, because I thought it was important to get the experience under my belt. As far as narration goes. So rough as this was, and as janky as this was, and I know I wasn't on schedule last week or for this season finale, I thank you either way for tuning in and listening, whether I know you personally or you're a newcomer. Gratitude goes the same either way. So that's it for the Monolith. That's it for the mechanic. Maybe not the ending everybody wanted, maybe not the ending you thought it was going to get, but it's the ending nonetheless. So, I'm working on new series, but you'll have to be patient and bear with me in the process of writing another sci-fi thriller in the vein of Monolith, but very distinct in tone and characters. I'm also working on a Western series that's got some Lovecraftian elements to it. I believe I talked about this in the last one, but that's on the way as well, a little bit closer to completion. So, as far as Guided Quiet Times go, those also are a few more of them in the works, but nothing really near completion in terms of that front. But you will see more of those before you see more of anything else, I believe. So keep your eyes peeled on the channel for that. Those are typically the videos I push harder anyways. So once again, thank you so much for bearing through the series with me. Any criticisms, any critiques you have, feel free to DM them to me or write them down here in the comments. It helps with the algorithm a lot. This has been Monolith by Warren Walker. Good night, and God bless.